Are you ready to make 2025 the year that you finally land your dream home? Whether you're navigating a competitive market or just vying for the one perfect property, getting your offer accepted isn't about luck, it's about strategy. In this video, I'm breaking down how you can craft a winning offer, gain an edge over other buyers, and finally hear those magical words, offer accepted. Let's get started. Whether there's a lot of inventory or very little, the best homes on the market, the ones that are the most appealing, the ones that are priced right, the ones that you really want, well, they receive multiple offers. Now, multiple offers are great if you're a seller, but what if you're a buyer? How do you get your offer to stand out from the competition and get accepted? It's key to understand what the seller wants and by extension, what the agent that represents the seller wants. And so ultimately, of course, they want to get their home sold, right? But they also want to make sure they do it with the least amount of hassle and for the most amount of money. They want a kind of a stress-free transaction that makes it all the way to the end. And they want to make sure above anything that they don't fall out of escrow. And so as a prospective buyer, you want to make sure that you give the seller what they want, or at least give them the impression that accepting your offer will help them meet their goals. The seller or the seller's agent will start sizing you up on the first time that you make contact with them. So that vetting process starts with that first phone call or that first text message or whatever it is. And so in the multiple listing service, it'll give you showing instructions and say something along the lines of call the listing agent for an appointment. And so what you should do is follow that instruction and call the listing agent for an appointment. Don't text them, don't try to make an appointment through an automated service. Don't just show up. Call and speak with the listing agent. And so that will give the impression that you are somebody who's cooperative and easy to work with. And that's an important first step. When I represent a seller, and I think I'm typical of most listing agents, I ask buyer agents to call and make an appointment. And I do that because I'm screening the appointments. I want to have a better understanding of who their client is and make sure they're financially qualified. I'm also kind of sizing up that agent, understanding who they are, how professional they are, and trying to make a determination of whether or not I can work with them. You know, ultimately, it's the seller who makes the decision on whose offer that we accept. But in every case, they'll ask my opinion of the buyers and the offer and the buyer's agent. And so just like in life, first impressions are important. Next, be courteous. Show up to your appointment on time. Try not to make any last minute changes, especially if it's an owner-occupied property. Make sure you leave the property exactly as you found it. Just use common courtesy and it goes a long way. So now, if you really like the property and you want to move forward and make an offer, ask your agent to first contact the listing agent and reintroduce himself or herself, reintroduce you as the buyer, and explain your enthusiasm for the property and how much you loved it, your financial qualifications, and then ask the listing agent about any needs or wants from the seller. So what they're looking for is what close of escrow, how long or how short, whether or not a rent back might be involved, anything else as far as terms are concerned that the seller would like to see in an offer. And the object here is to write an offer that the seller could accept without a counteroffer. So this is an important call. Okay, it's time to write an offer. So here in California, we use the California Residential Purchase Agreement and Joint Escrow Instructions. This document is published by the California Association of Realtors and be the most common document that we would use in the state of California. But if you're in another state, not to worry, all the terms and conditions that we're going to talk about would apply to you as well. It's very common across all 50 states. So the top of the purchase agreement is the purchase price or sales price. And obviously this is at the top of the seller's mind as well. So it's something you really should consider closely. It's not everything about the offer though. The purchase price is important, but terms are super important too. And we're going to go through those as we travel through the document. They're very, very important. And each offer, when they're reviewed with the seller, they'll be looking at the entirety of the offer, not just the sale price. So pay attention, it's important. I think as far as the value that you put on this property, you need to do a little research. And so you should do some form of a comparative market analysis, looking at recent sales in the area and really understand the value of the property. The other thing you want to consider is what the property means to you. And what I mean by that is if this is going to be your primary residence, then you and your family members, your loved ones, are going to move into this property. And so it's an emotional decision as well as a financial one. And that's something that you really want to consider when you're making the offer. Okay, so next there's close of escrow. Now, again, it's important to call the listing agent, speak with them about what's comfortable for the seller. For the seller, it can be very difficult. They may have lived there for quite some time, and logistically, it's a lot to get the property moved. So you want to make sure that the date that's put in here is something that they can live with, and of course that you can live with it as well. Next is the expiration of offer. You want to be careful here. This particular document expires automatically after 3 days. You can extend that or you can shorten it. Sometimes if you're trying to push the seller into making a decision, you could shorten it to 24 hours or even less. If you're trying to push for that decision, that might be a negotiation tactic for you. But if the property is very popular and you're trying to be cooperative, you may want to go the full 3 days, or you may want to even extend that depending on when the seller is actually going to review offers. So something, again, to discuss with your buyer's agent and have a better understanding with the seller. Next, there's initial deposit. In California, it's customary to put at least 1% of the purchase price down as a earnest money deposit. The contract allows the seller to collect up to 3% or the amount of the initial deposit as part of this contract. And so most sellers are going to push to get 3%. So as a seller, if you're a buyer and you're trying to get the seller to accept your offer without countering, it would probably be best to go ahead and offer up 3% of the purchase price as an initial deposit amount. This, again, is something that you want to consider and discuss with your buyer's agent. Next is loan amount. Now, don't be afraid to write an offer on a popular property, even though you're having to finance it and you're competing against cash offers. Cash offers are great. Cash is king, supposedly. But many times a well-written financed offer can beat out a cash offer because of the terms that are in the offer, and it just makes sense. At the end of the day, the seller is going to get a check from the escrow company. They're going to get that check whether or not they got paid cash for the house or it got paid by the bank. Next is verification of all cash and verification of down payment and closing costs. These should always be included in your offer. The seller is going to want to review your financial documents to make sure that you have the money on hand to go ahead and pay your earnest money deposit, all down payments, or for the property itself. So next is the contingency periods, and this is a place where a buyer can really shine with regard to the terms that they're offering. And so you'll notice that in each case there's 17 days for the buyer to do their due diligence. And from a seller's standpoint, 17 days is an eternity. And so a buyer, the shorter they can make these contingency periods, the more favorable a seller is going to look on their offer. And so we want to look at each particular contingency and see how we can shorten those to make it more palatable for the seller. Okay, so the first contingency we come to is the loan contingency. It shows 17 days as a standard for this agreement, and then you can write in the number of days or a no loan contingency. This is something you can speak with your lender about and see how quickly they can allow you to remove this contingency, Or as an option, if you can find a lender that will do a fully underwritten pre-approval, you'll be able to actually make an offer without a loan contingency because all of the steps have been taken prior to you actually making the offer, which can be a fantastic thing. So not all lenders offer this. If you need one that does, please let me know and I'll hook you up. Next is the appraisal contingency. Now again, you want to speak with your lender about this. The lender can do certain things to speed up the process so that they won't need a full 17 days. Some lenders, for instance, will order an appraisal as soon as the offer is accepted and maybe be able to get the appraisal done in 7 days, which would be a great advantage from the seller's point. Having no appraisal contingency is best, which requires you to do your homework, of course, and there is some risk involved and something that you really want to speak with your lender and with your agent about before you do that. Next is the investigation of the property. This is your physical inspection of the property to make sure there's no major issues with it. You may want to go ahead and hire a home inspector in advance of making an offer, and then that way have a better understanding of how quickly you can get them there and then get that all figured out. You should be able to reduce this contingency period quite a bit. Next is insurance. There's been a lot of stuff happening in the insurance market, and so this is an area where you really want to do your due diligence up front. You want to find an insurance broker that's writing policies. You probably want to speak with that person about where you're purchasing and get an idea of what you will pay for a specific property before you ever actually make the offer, and then have that person in place. Okay, next are the review of the seller documents, preliminary title report, common interest disclosures, and review of leased and lien items. These obviously are important documents for you to review. You want to leave yourself a little leeway to get that done. But at the same time, we're trying to get the offer accepted, and so we want to reduce these time periods as well. You may want to consider trying to line up all the contingency periods. For instance, if your loan was 10 days, for instance, if you can see your way to making all the contingency removals within 10 days, that would probably greatly reduce the seller's anxiety and help you towards actually getting the offer accepted. So next is the seller delivery of documents. This is important if you're reducing your time periods. You want to make sure that the seller is delivering you the documents that you need very quickly so that you have time to review them. So make sure they match up with your contingency removal times. Next in this document, there's a whole list of items that are either included or not included in the property. You want to be careful in this area and don't make any assumptions. Go ahead and check off all the stuff that you expect to be in the home at close of escrow. This will alleviate any misunderstandings and help for a smooth transition. Okay, so next is the allocation of costs, and what we're talking about here is the fees associated with the close of escrow. So customarily, there are fees paid by the seller, there are fees paid by the buyer, all customarily, and we want to stick with that. So as a buyer, we don't want to be asking the seller to pay a fee that's normally paid by the buyer. Just stay with the customary figures and you'll be best off as far as getting your offer accepted. The second thing, sometimes buyer's agents want to write in who the title company is going to be, who the escrow holder is going to be. It's a bad practice. Sellers typically select the services, so you want to stick with that. It will usually equal a counter offer if the buyer's agent writes these people in. So just let the seller, as is customary, select the services and you'll be a lot closer to getting your offer. Next is the home warranty. These are customarily paid by the seller. It's something I recommend each one of my sellers go ahead and pay for. I actually recommend that they pay for it even if the seller, or excuse me, even if the buyer doesn't request it. This is an area where you may be able to get a few brownie points when you make the offer by saving the seller $500 to $1,500 depending on the price of this particular warranty. So things to think about. The next is other terms, and this is a place where you could install any other verbiage that you needed to, or any other terms. What comes to mind is an escalation clause, And so an escalation clause is actually a term that says something along the lines of, we will increase our sale price by $1,000 over any other verifiable offer up to a maximum of X. And so this could be useful in getting an offer accepted, obviously, and something you can discuss with your agent. We won't go into the full details here, but definitely something to consider and very successful sometimes. Okay, then lastly, there's something called a love letter, and you can consider doing this. And so what it is, it's a personal letter from you to the seller. A lot of times it has pictures and just kind of conveys your desire to purchase the seller's property. The idea is that the sellers lived there a long time and they would like to see somebody who really appreciates the home move into their home after they leave. And so it's designed to pull on the seller's heartstrings. It's something you can consider writing. It does work from time to time. We'll leave that up to you. Okay, next, you're all finished. You've signed the offer and you're almost there. Your agent is about to email the offer, but wait, your agent should call the listing agent and again, express your enthusiasm for the property. Let him know that he's about to get an offer in his or her inbox. Again, expressing the enthusiasm that you have for the property. And I know that sounds like overkill, but the truth is an enthusiastic buyer will cross the finish line is much more likely to cross the finish line than an unenthusiastic buyer. So that stating of enthusiasm is really important. And it goes a long ways in assuring the seller and the listing agent that you are going to cross the line with them. So that being said, you go ahead and send the email, make sure it has the supporting documents, proof of funds, pre-approval letter, love letter if you've included it. Make sure that the email has a summary of the contents of the offer. Make sure that the agent asks for confirmation of receipt. Make sure they follow up afterwards to make sure the agent did in fact receive it and when they'll be reviewing it with the seller. All these things are super important. So once that's done, then you want your lender to go ahead and call the listing agent as well and speak highly of your praises, how well qualified you are, how much money you have, what a great client they are, what a good mortgage company that they're dealing with, et cetera, et cetera. What you're trying to do is make sure that everybody involved in the transaction has this good feeling about you and your ability to perform this contract. It goes a long way. By now, you have all the tools that you need to make a strong, compelling offer that sellers won't want to refuse. The key is presentation, attention to detail, and teamwork with a skilled agent who knows how to put your best foot forward. If you found this helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe and share it with anyone gearing up to buy in 2025. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to help. Here's to turning your dream home into reality. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.